Hello, my friends. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I just have some books that I've read recently that I didn't vlog about that I want to talk about, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. So the first book that I want to talk about is actually a novella, and it is called Again by J.L. Seegers. So when I first read Restore Me in the fall, several people said, have you read her novella? It's really good. And I was like, no. I don't really like novellas. They usually don't work for me, so I didn't read it. But I saw this quote when I was actually looking up quotes for J.L. Seegers' book, Restore Me, and I saw a quote that was attributed to Again, and I was like, I must read that. And so I did. I picked it up on Kindle Unlimited. It's a fairly short novella. I think it's like a 2.5-hour read or something like that. But I absolutely loved it. It was beautiful. Perfection. It was almost as emotional for me as Restore Me was, but because it was shorter, it didn't quite have the build-up or relationship development that I felt like Restore Me did, but nonetheless, it was still a 5-star read. Absolutely stunning. So this is a second chance romance, and this is actually a divorced couple. So we have Jackson, our hero, and Amina, our heroine, and they have been divorced. They are recently called to, or asked to come to this like elopement of one of their brothers and sisters, like they're related, and it's Amina's sister and her soon-to-be husband. And they're going to go on a ship and go to this destination elopement with just the 4 of them. So the book immediately opens with some introspection of the characters about, the past, and they know they're going to meet each other on this trip. And then Amina finds out that she's actually been upgraded to first class, and wouldn't you know it, who does she sit right next to but her ex-husband, Jackson? And that begins Jackson's pursuit of her to try and win her back and win her heart again. Because the situation in their relationship that caused to the breakup was largely one of a misunderstanding, but with so much hurt and pain behind it that they didn't ever really confront that, and there were some guilty feelings on each side. So this book does have trigger warnings for infidelity, divorce, and infertility. But I think that all of those aspects combined into this to just make me ache, and it made my heart just hurt for this couple, and I wanted them to get back together so badly. And this is another case of our hero, very similar to Dom, where he goes above and beyond to try and do everything in his power to win back her heart, because he has realized there is no other woman on the planet for him. He will never be happy with another woman. He can't love another woman. Like, she is it for him. And this couple is also like their childhood sweethearts. They've known each other and fallen in love from a very young age. They knew each other at 13, so they have so much history together. And that's another thing that I just deeply, deeply love. I love seeing couples who have so much history and so much love, but something painful happens and that sort of severs them for a moment. And I love getting to see them find their way back to each other, because I really do have a strong belief that love will conquer all, and that two people who are meant to be together will always find their way back to each other. So this just absolutely resonated with me. It was beautiful. It was steamy. It was perfection. I loved watching this man completely go out of his mind for this woman and just so determined to have her. And there was also this reconciliation moment, which you're going to have, where they finally talk about what actually happened and the perceived hurts that the other one did. And it felt very realistic to me in that way, because I think that when the situation specifically that this couple was in, where there was so much on the line, all of their hopes and dreams are pinned on this thing. And then when one of them expresses a feeling like, maybe we shouldn't do that anymore, the other one is just devastated. And that is like a chain of events that lead that person down this like spiral to believe the worst. And when things are presented to them, there's another woman involved, and it's just like, it's so good. This just has J.L. Seegers' trademark beautiful writing. It's just haunting. You're really in their heads. You get to see their thoughts and motivations. And I think that's one reason specifically why this author works for me so well, is because even though she puts you in situations where miscommunication is largely the cause of the breakup or the disruption in the relationship, she gets you into their heads so much that you understand why they had a miscommunication, and you're just sort of left there thinking, like, I understand your thought process. It makes sense that you guys didn't communicate about this very well. So, I don't know. This just worked for me on every level. I loved it so much, and 5 stars. Okay, so now the next book that I have is Choosing Theo. So this is a sci-fi alien romance, and I've been seeing this book around the book world for a very long time. And the person who first brought this book to my attention was Jesson, and I noticed that she was like reading more in the series, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a book I actually really want to get to. So I picked it up. My library has these on audio, and I started listening to it, and I really, really got sucked into the story very, very quickly, and I just found myself completely swept away in this. I think this is a really great alien sci-fi romance. It has so many aspects of this that draw us to that genre, where it's basically set in this alien world. Our heroine is kidnapped, and she's taken to this other planet, and then she ends up on this other planet where she, because of like this intergalactic agreement, she has to stay there and live there for a year, and she has to get married in that time. And what this planet considers marriage to be is very different than what humans consider it to be. It's not like a lifetime commitment. It's you stay married for 3 months. The goal is to try and get babies, because women are so scarce on this planet that we need babies. And so because they need babies, every single thing that this planet does is for women's benefit, for their comfort, for their happiness. And it was just very, very refreshing to see that brought up in that way. I know that this is, you know, like, I'm not super well versed in alien romance or sci-fi romance, but there's a hint of this in Ice Planet Barbarians, where the women are just very much prized, and everything is considered from their point of view, things that will enhance their life, and there's never any real, like, sacrifice on the women's part for the men. I mean, you know, other than relationships and love, but I feel like this felt just very comforting in that way, to see women so elevated in society, and I felt like it was just very fresh and unique, and I just really enjoyed the whole world building of that aspect. So our couple ends up meeting when the heroine, Jade, has to, like, see this parade of men, basically alien men, who look like humans. Like, they're pretty much human, pretty much. And they kind of just, like, walk by her, and she's supposed to just, like, take her pick of who she thinks is the most attractive. And she finds herself drawn to Theo, who is this big, giant, gruff, burly alien man. And instead of just, like, regular markings like the other aliens have, he has these dark scars all over his body. And that's sort of something that he's very self-conscious of, that the other women don't want him because they consider those to be ugly, and there's a whole bunch of nuance to his scars and how they affect him mentally, and why the other women don't want him, which I also felt like was really beautiful, because our heroine is here seeing this big, beautiful, handsome, rugged man, and she's just like, him, I want him. Why does nobody else want him? Because in her mind, it's just tattoos. It's not a mark of weakness or anything like that. So she picks him. They get married, and they have, of course, this powerful attraction and chemistry. And not only are the men sort of, their whole purpose is to serve and please women in every way, including in the bedroom, which, I mean, like, it's just fun, okay? It's just very, very fun to read about that. It's a very great escapist fantasy in that way. But the thing that makes this sort of a little bit elevated for me was the way that they connected through their past histories, specifically the heroes, when he's telling her about, you know, what happened to him, where he came from, why he has the scars, and why he feels that way. And it's not like he just tells her all at once. It's a very layered, gradual conversation that they have, and he's very hesitant to open up to her. So watching him finally do that was absolutely wonderful. So I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. There was one aspect of it that I personally did not like, and I think that it was so subtly and sort of just kind of thrown in there at the last minute that I'm not sure that anybody else would feel the same way unless they were, like, attuned to this thing like I am. And the hero is completely obsessed with her, and they are mates, which is rare in this society, so they have that fated mate type of draw where it's like, nobody touches my person, you know? And he is very protective of her, but also very possessive of her. And look, a possessive, jealous hero is all fun and games when you're reading about it. And it was, right? We love a jealous, protective hero. We really, really do. We love when he's like, mine, nobody else can have you. Like, I love that. I do. But there is a moment where it can turn into something that I greatly dislike, and that is when the hero is confronted with another man who wants this woman, you know, and because women are so rare and so prized, she's like a valuable commodity. So this other man comes up, wants her towards the very end, and this is right before like the mate connection snapped into place. So he's very volatile in that way, you know. And Theo sees this other man like wanting her, approaching her, trying to like win her over. And he immediately kind of like goes into a rage, possessive, gonna break bodies, whoever touches her, you know? And there is this one tiny moment where in that rage that he has, in that desire to get other men away from her, that anger and violence is turned just for a moment onto the heroine. And, you know, this is a part where I feel like the bridge between fiction and reality can be very small, because that is something that absolutely happens in real life when we have a man who, you know, for all intents and purposes, he's just trying to protect and keep other people away from the woman that he loves. But a lot of times when he does that, that anger, that rage, I guess, that seems like a bit harsh to say rage, because it's not entirely rage, but that anger, that violence, for even just a moment, spills over, not just into the other man when he gets her away from him, but then it spills over into the heroine and his actions towards her where he hurts her. And I hate that so much, and I felt like that was like a personal thing that I don't ever want to see in a protective hero. That's the antithesis of being protective. But I also felt like it was a misstep in this book specifically because of how these alien men are so programmed through their whole society to prize and protect these women, that in this moment when he felt like a threat was near, he was, you know, violent, trying to push him away, but then it spilled over and he hurt his woman, and I don't like that. So it was a small moment, and it wasn't like he hurt her a lot, but I wish that hadn't happened, that it had only been directed to the other guy. So that, again, I feel like a lot of people might not pick up on that, but that's something that I'm sensitive to, and therefore 4 out of 5 stars for that one. Okay, so now this next book that I read is The Frontrunner by Elsie Silver. This is book 3 in her... oh my gosh, I cannot remember the name of this series. I don't know, this is the Racehorse... this is the Racehorse series. I know the name of it, but every single time I talk about this series, the name of the series is like, just completely leaves my brain. So, this book is about the vet, Mira, and our hero, Stefan, who is the owner of a rival racehorse ranch, where he's competing with the people from, you know, that we've read about in the first 2 books, who own their thoroughbred racing ranch, and they're competitors, basically. And everyone thinks he's just like a jerk, a douchebag. Nobody likes him. He's this big, giant, powerful, absolutely attractive man that the women acknowledge that he's very attractive, but they don't like him. And he kind of leans into that aspect of being a jerk, being a douchebag. He plays up on that. And I think that's typically something that he does to hide his vulnerabilities. So in this book, it happens that their prize stallion has sired a foal, and the mare has passed away. So the foal is an orphan, and they're worried that it's going to survive without a mother. And Stefan has just lost a foal, so he has a nurse mare available. And Mira is the vet, who we've seen in the previous 2 books, and she's like, hey, she presents this to the owner of, you know, our home ranch with Cole, and she was in the first book. She's like, hey, you know what? I think that Stefan actually has a nurse mare who could mother this foal. And there's reluctance there because the guy's a douchebag, nobody likes him, but eventually they agree. And that is sort of what throws Stefan and Mira together when they're trying to save this foal's life, nurse it back to health. And they're in close quarters, forced proximity, like a working type of situation, where she starts to realize that maybe he's not quite the douchebag that she thought he was, that he's actually a really nice guy, and that he's got layers and baggage that he's carrying, and she just finds herself not only just physically attracted to him, but also attracted to the man that she's starting to realize that he is. I loved this book. I loved it so much. I gave it 5 stars. I felt like pretty much everything about this book was perfect for me. I think this is in this series, well, I've only read this book in the previous one, but so far, this one gave me close to the vibes that I got from Flawless and Heartless. It's just such an easy read, so easy to get sucked into. I loved the chemistry between the couple. I loved seeing the family. You know, we get to go to Mira's family's house. Her family is Indian, and so they have all these like preconceived notions of what she should do, that she should be married, that she should have kids, and she wants a career as a vet, and she's really been successful in that, and she has a lot of pain because her family didn't like acknowledge that and things like that. And Stefan has a lot of his own baggage regarding his family. He's lost his mother. He's basically raising his teenage little sister and trying to make sure that she comes out of that life situation as unscathed as possible. So there's a lot of crossover into their families, which I think Elsie Silver does really well. She has that family element just that feels so loving and warm and close-knit, even though they're obviously like full of problems like a real family is. So I just loved this. I loved watching them fall in love. Of course, your resident horse girl, loved and adored all of the horse representation in here. Like, I just loved it so much. It was giving me big vibes to this series, which I read as a kid over and over and over. Loved it so freaking much, but, you know, like an adult romance, and I just loved it, so I gave it 5 stars. It was perfect for me. I had a ton of fun. I just enjoyed the heck out of it. Okay, so now this is actually a reread for me. This is a YA book that I have read so many times, but probably I think the first time I read this was in 2008 when I was knee deep in my YA vampire phase. Like, that is all I wanted to read. I was all about fantasy romance in YA, and I think that's largely because that's what was just like marketed so much at the time. Much like we go into Barnes & Noble today and we see spicy TikTok books all over the place. I remember in 2008 that was like YA vampire romance was like everywhere, and so I was like completely enmeshed in it. So I have a lot of nostalgic feelings for this book. I loved this series when I read it originally, and I haven't revisited it in over 10 years. Probably, I think the last time I maybe read this series was like 2010. I don't even remember. But this is basically about, so the thing that I really do like about this series, even today upon reread, is the way that the vampire world is set up, and like the different categories of vampires and half vampires and what they do, what their purpose is in their society. I think it's really, really well laid out. I think it's very clever, and it continues through all of the books in this series and in the spin-off series. So I think the world building in this is really pretty excellent, especially considering how it blends it right up against like our real world in a very realistic, believable urban fantasy type of setting. So you have like pure blood vampires, you have royal vampires, you have half vampires, you have evil vampires. It's just like very, very fascinating and very interesting, and I just really enjoy that aspect of it. And so like even upon reread, I felt like this is solid world building. Like, this is really excellently well thought out and just really great. Now, I will say that originally I rated this book 4 stars, and I'm not going to change my star rating on Goodreads, and one of the main reasons is because I feel like anytime that I read YA books today, I don't want to rate them low, because especially in this one and a lot of other YA books that I've read, they're very clearly targeted to a teen audience. This book has teenage characters, and they feel like teenagers, and I think that can be very off-putting for adult readers who come to YA. I don't think all YA is like that. I think there's a lot of YA, specifically YA fantasy, that has broad crossover for adults, because the characters don't feel like teenagers. In this book, the characters feel like teenagers, and part of that is because this is the first book in the series, so we're going to watch these characters grow throughout time and years. But another part of it is that this does exactly what it intends to do. It targets a teenage audience. That's who it's written for. So it's written with a very fast pace, very easy to read. It's got forbidden romance in here. Like, everything in this book is textbook to draw an appeal to a teenage audience. And I personally don't want to fault a book for that when I know that I'm not the target audience this is written for. This is written for teenagers. This is a book that is very much entrenched in a teenage world, a teenage point of view, and it does it really well. But it's not super fun to read about teenagers when you're a 40-year-old woman. You know what I mean? You know, I say that, but there are those books that feel very like coming of age, that feel a little bit wistful, that feel a little bit like on that cusp of adulthood, that I do really love, and I think that that's a universal feeling of relatability. That doesn't happen in here at all, but it's still a fun time. I love the characters, even though a lot of them are teenagers to the extreme. So my enjoyment level of this upon reread is probably like a 3-star, but structurally, as a piece of young adult fiction, I think it does its job really, really well. It's fun. It it does what it intended to do, and I think it does it well. So, it's not a 5-star read. I have a lot of nostalgic, warm feelings for this, but it wasn't super, super engaging on reread, and that's largely just because of the immaturity of the characters, which I can't fault it for, you know? Okay, so now, the last book in this recent reads video is one of the most beautiful books that I have read in a very long time that haunts me. Was a complete page-turner, which was swoony and romantic, and just a feat of literature that I loved, and I'm probably never going to forget about. And it is Son of the Shadows by Juliette Marillier. So I recently have been reading through Juliette Marillier's books, largely because of Jesson, entirely because of Jesson, not largely, entirely because of Jesson. She speaks so highly of Juliette Marillier, and she has said that she's a very foundational author in her reading journey, and I just find that very fascinating and interesting to read books by, you know, friends or people I love and care about. I really enjoy reading what books they gravitated towards when they were becoming readers, you know. So this is largely what Jesson talks about. And I just recently read Daughter of the Forest, which I vlogged about. It was like one of my first books of the year. So this is the second book in the Seven Waters series. And the events that happen in Daughter of the Forest are events that you see sort of like echoing throughout the series. So this book is the second generation. So the main character in Daughter of the Forest is Sorcha, and this is her children's story. So we're still back in Seven Waters. We're back in this very fantasy, mythical, but grounded in reality type of magical setting. It feels like a fairy tale, but it feels like a very realistic fairy tale where, like, you just feel sometimes, you know, have you ever like been hiking or been out in the woods and it's just you and you have this moment where you like think, I believe in magic. Like, I could believe in magic at this time, because it feels like otherworldly, but not in like a wand and wizard type of way, in a way that feels like I could believe that there are like forest spirits out here, you know? Is that just me? I don't know, maybe that's just me. Anyway, this book is just full of that feeling of magic is there, but it's never like instantly available. It's never like the magic that's going to save the day. It's there, but it's just on the periphery. So you can't always see it. You not always have access to it, but you know that it's there. It's just this part of your awareness. So the heroine in this book is Liadon, and she is Sorcha and Red's daughter. And it's basically her journey and her family's journey. So Liadon is very much a product of her family. The events that happened in the first book created a happily ever after for Sorcha and Red, and that's basically what the people left over are, you know, the people who haven't passed away and things like that, are living the life of the happily ever after that Sorcha and Red got when they defeated the evil and the brothers were no longer swans. So Liadon's world is much different than Sorcha's world was, and I think that you could say that Liadon enters the book already as a strong character, so she doesn't have quite the huge character arc that Sorcha did in the first book, but she does have a really great character arc in this book. There is some tragic event that happens in her family that sort of causes this rupture, where her sister is sent to an arranged marriage that she is very unhappy about. And Liadon ends up being kidnapped. She also is a healer like Sorcha, and she is called to heal this blacksmith with this band of like outlaws and criminals. They kidnapped her, they knew she was a healer, and they took her to try and heal their friend who is on the brink of death. And that is where Sorcha meets Bran, our hero, who is a very mysterious figure. He's called the Painted Man. He has tattoos and markings all over him, and he's basically like this dangerous outlaw. And from the minute that they meet, they have this chemistry, this attraction, this draw to one another that feels almost like mystical and definitely soul level. And it's such a powerful feeling to read about this couple and see the way that they felt. And it's such a stark contrast to what happened with Sorcha and Red, which was very slow building and developing. This one feels like it happens like a bang. They end up getting together, tragedy strikes, and they're separated for a large portion of the book. And that's where Liadon has to try and solve this curse, basically, that has been placed upon her family and her house, that the fair folk continuously remind her of. This is what you need to do, there's danger coming, and Liadon has the sight, so she sort of sees future events that may happen, that might not happen. and there's this big feeling of impending doom as you're reading this book, and you just know, like, bad things are coming, but you don't know what they are. So this book is full of plot. The first book felt very gradual in the way that the story was told. It was very, like, slow building and evolving. This book, I feel like plot happens, twists happen, events happen, like, one after the other. So I was instantly engaged more with this book, which kind of surprises me because I think historically I'm very much more a slow burn, slow building story reader. But it worked for me here, and I think that's because so much of what was happening in the plot was the effect of what had happened in the first book. And that's something that I really, really love about this, is the way that the plot in this book is a very direct effect of what happened in the first book. And something else that I think this book really excels at is characters and family and the way that you feel so strongly for these people. Juliette Marillier is not afraid to kill her characters off. There are so many beloved characters that I've read about that she has killed that I am just, like, devastated and heartbroken. There was a scene in here regarding the loss of a love that we read about in the first book, and we get to see that hero sort of left behind and struggling with his love who's gone, and it just devastated my soul. It was so beautiful. I gave this book 5 stars. If you like fantasy, I would highly recommend this. This is fantasy with romantic elements. I think the romance in here for me was maybe a little bit more appealing, a little stronger, and I think that's just because the interactions that these couple had were more frequent, but still not, like, high frequency like you would expect from a TikTok fantasy romance, you know. But I also really loved the struggle that both of them had, where they wanted to be together, but they felt like they shouldn't, and then there's something very specifically that happens in the hero's past that makes him believe that she is not for him, that she, you know, caused all these bad things to happen in his life, or that her family did, and it's just very, very interesting. I think something that I am realizing about Juliette Marillier is, and something that I find really fascinating about her books, is how she talks about the disparity between genders. In every single book of hers that I've read, that is an issue. Not an issue, that's something that she focuses on, and the words that she uses to talk about that disparity are very deliberately chosen, and that's something that I deeply, deeply love. So in each book of hers that I've read 3, they all have themes of sexual assault and violence against women. And we get to see very realistically the absolutely devastating effect that that has on the women who are left behind trying to live with that act. But I also think that she shows you the men who perpetrate that act and how little thought they even give to that, and how they feel like that is something they just can take and give no thought to the effect that that has on the women in their lives. So in a way that is very painful to read about, but I also feel like it's entrenched in reality, and I just absolutely love seeing a very, very masterful author take something that is timeless, that appeals to all generations, and put that into a fantasy book that makes you feel like you are seen and that you notice this, and it's just so beautifully done. Like, there is a woman in here who is a victim of domestic abuse, basically. She's put in this arranged marriage, her husband beats her and rapes her, and the effect of that on her is so devastating. She is just a shell of a woman because of that. And there's this moment in here where the heroine Liaden sort of reflects on that, and she's thinking about how this woman never put on a show. She never put on a facade to make things easier for the husband, who was going to take whatever he wanted from her, whether she gave her consent or not. And Liaden says, you know, that's something that a lot of women will do. They'll put on a facade, they'll put on a show, they'll acquiesce, they'll do whatever the husband says, because that's less painful than admittedly not wanting what the man wants. And it was just powerful, sad, haunting, but overall, I just enjoy these stories so much. They're so richly told, beautiful use of language, really excellent characters. I am obsessed, and the romance in here was just beautiful. So I love this book. I gave it 5 stars, and I feel like I've only touched on, like, the tip of the iceberg of the things that I want to say about it, but it was fantastic. Loved it so much. This one is probably my favorite Juliette Marillier so far. Alright, there you have it. I've talked for a lot about 5 books. Those are some of the books that I have recently read, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you have made it this far, please feel free to leave me just a smiley face, I guess. Is that easy? That's probably easy for people who are at their keyboard too. And I'll see y'all in my next video.